I don't know how to explain the morning everything changed, because even now, when I replay it in my head, it feels like a dream I'm still not fully awake from. I remember opening my eyes and thinking something was wrong before I even understood what it was. The sunlight felt different on my skin, softer somehow. The room looked bigger, like I had been shrunk overnight. And the weight of my own body felt unfamiliar, like I wasn't sitting inside the frame I'd known my whole life. At first I thought it was one of those half-awake states, like when your limbs feel disconnected and you're not fully in control. But then I pushed myself up from the bed and saw a strand of long hair fall over my face. Not mine. Not possible. Not real. I reached up automatically, ran my fingers through it, and felt a small jolt of panic shoot up my spine. My hair had always been short, messy, nothing like the smooth, shoulder-length hair brushing my collarbone. I stumbled toward the mirror, heart pounding, not even breathing properly as I grabbed the frame of the dresser to steady myself. And when I looked into the mirror, a girl looked back. Not just any girl. A face I didn't recognize at all. Soft features, bright eyes, lips that looked too expressive, too new. A stranger. A stranger who blinked when I blinked. I remember whispering out loud, in a voice that wasn't mine, higher and lighter, like air slipping through glass, "This isn't me." But the reflection just repeated the movements. I touched my cheek, she touched hers. I pulled at my hair, she did the same. The room spun for a moment because nothing made sense. I tried to speak again, but the sound cracked in my throat, unfamiliar. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I didn't feel like I was inside a girl's body, I felt like I had been pushed into someone else's life without warning. I splashed water on my face, hoping it would shock me awake, but the girl staring back just looked more terrified. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and turned the camera toward myself. Maybe the mirror was tricking me. Maybe I was still dreaming. But the screen showed the same girl, the same face that was supposed to be mine. I opened my mouth to speak again, and the girl's voice came out. That was the moment I felt something heavy settle inside me, like a truth I didn't want but couldn't escape. I needed help. I needed someone to believe me. I rushed out of the room, almost tripping over my own feet because even my balance felt wrong. My legs moved differently, lighter, quicker. My center of gravity felt shifted. Every part of me was unfamiliar. My sister was the first person I found. She was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone with a cup of tea. When she looked up and saw me, she smiled casually, like nothing was strange, like her brother hadn't vanished overnight. "Morning," she said, not even noticing my panic. I stood there, trembling, trying to find words. "It's me," I whispered. She frowned slightly. "What?" I swallowed hard. "It's me. Your brother." She stared at me, then laughed the kind of laugh people make when they think you're joking but don't quite get it. "Okay, weird prank. But good makeup, I'll give you that." She went back to her phone. I felt my throat tighten. "I'm serious," I said, louder. "Something happened to me. I woke up like this. I don't know who this girl is, I don't know what's going on, I don't even know if I'm dreaming." My voice cracked and I felt myself shaking, but she just raised an eyebrow. "Right. And I'm supposed to believe that my brother magically turned into some random girl overnight?" Her tone was flat, but there was confusion behind her eyes. She didn't believe me. Not even a little. I tried to explain everything, step by step, but the more I talked, the more she looked at me like I was losing my mind. She asked if I'd hit my head. She asked if someone put me up to this. She asked if I needed to lie down. Every word I said made her believe me less. Finally she snapped, "Enough. Just tell me who you are. If you're in trouble or running from something, just say it. Don't pretend to be him." Hearing that hurt more than anything. Pretend. As if this was some twisted choice. I felt tears building behind my eyes, which only made her more suspicious, because I almost never cried. She sighed and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen, fighting the rising feeling that I had no one. I tried calling my best friend next. If anyone would believe me, he would. But when he picked up, I froze for a full second, listening to his familiar voice while staring at my unfamiliar hands. "Who is this?" he asked. I forced myself to speak. It's me. It's actually me. I need you to listen carefully. He laughed. Okay, prank caller, good luck. And he hung up. I called again. And again. Finally he blocked the number. My chest felt like it was collapsing. My breath kept catching. I looked at the girl in the phone camera again, and for a second, I didn't even recognize myself as the person panicking. It felt like two identities were crashing into each other, one real and one forced on me, and I didn't know how to hold them together. I went back to my room and locked the door. I sat on the floor with my back against the bed, trying to think, trying to breathe, trying to convince myself this was solvable. But the longer I stayed in that body, the more real it felt, the more impossible it became to deny. Every movement, every breath, every sound was a reminder that I wasn't who I used to be. And then something strange started happening. Little fragments of memories that weren't mine flickered in my head, like whispers from someone else's life. A classroom I had never been in. A mother's voice I didn't recognize. A friend I'd never spoken to. They felt distant, blurry, but they were there. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to push them out, afraid that if they stayed too long, I'd forget my real memories. Forget myself. I curled up on the floor, holding my head, trying to hold on to who I was. But the truth was becoming harder to grip. Not only did no one believe me, but something inside me was changing in ways I couldn't control. And that was only the beginning of the day. By midday, I realized I couldn't stay in my room forever. The world didn't pause just because my life had gone insane. I had to face it, even if it meant humiliation, confusion, or outright disbelief. I walked down the hallway, every step a reminder of how different my body felt. My hands brushed against my thighs, my chest felt strange under my clothes, and even the way I moved made me feel exposed. I couldn't stop looking at myself in reflective surfaces, and each time I did, panic surged again. I tried to leave the house to get some air, to prove to myself that I was still me in some way. The moment I stepped outside, though, the reactions I got made me question everything. People stared. Some whispered. A few laughed. Not because I looked like a joke, but because they didn't recognize me. I had to swallow hard every time someone said, "Hey, aren't you?" and trailed off. I didn't even know what to answer. "I'm me," I wanted to shout, but my voice felt fragile, unconvincing. Every encounter reminded me how alone I was in this. I felt like a ghost of my own life, haunting the people who had known me. By the afternoon, I realized I couldn't manage school, work, or even social media. My friends, teachers, and family were all convinced this was a prank or some weird hallucination. Even the simplest things became terrifying. When I tried to log into my accounts, the security questions flagged me instantly. My own online world had rejected me. I remember sitting on a bench in a quiet park, clutching my head, trying to remember the boy I had been just 24 hours ago. The memories were still there, but the physical sensations of this new body made me question them. Then, almost accidentally, I discovered something unexpected. Looking around nervously, I noticed the way people treated me changed the moment I tried to act normally. I had thought they would laugh, ignore me, or ridicule me, but some faces softened. Some people smiled politely, asked if I was okay. I realized there was a kind of power in this new appearance, not the kind anyone expects, but a way people approached me differently, listened differently. It was terrifying and oddly illuminating. I hadn't asked for it, but I had it now. I felt exposed and strangely visible in ways I never had before. By evening, exhaustion overtook panic. I returned home, expecting judgment, disbelief, maybe anger. Instead, I found my parents waiting in the living room. Their faces were lined with confusion and worry. My mother looked like she wanted to cry, my father like he was trying to figure out if he had lost his mind. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell them it was me, their son, trapped in a body that wasn't supposed to be mine. But the words caught in my throat. Could they handle this? Could anyone? The weight of their disbelief was almost tangible. I woke up like this, I finally said. My voice trembled, and I avoided their eyes, afraid they would reject me outright. My mother reached for my hand. "Woke up like what?" she asked softly, carefully. "Like this," I whispered, lifting my hands and gesturing to the unfamiliar body, the hair, the face. Her eyes widened, but she didn't recoil. She just held my hand tighter. My father's brow furrowed, and he shook his head, muttering, "It's not possible. There's no way," but there was a softness there I hadn't expected. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could start to believe me. I stayed with them that night, curled up on the couch in clothes that were too unfamiliar, listening to their murmurs and my own thoughts racing. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined the boy I had been slipping further away. And yet, a strange realization was creeping in. I had to survive in this body, because even if everyone else refused to believe me, I was still here. I was still real. And maybe, just maybe, I could figure out what it meant to live as this new version of myself. It was the first time I truly understood that identity wasn't just about recognition, or voice, or even appearance. It was about surviving, adapting, and finding courage when everything familiar had vanished. And deep down, a fear I couldn't ignore settled in. What if no one ever believed me? What if I had to navigate the rest of my life trapped in this body that wasn't mine, fighting every day to hold on to the person I used to be, while learning who I might become? I didn't have answers yet. I only had fear, confusion, and a fragile sense of hope. And that night, I made a decision. I would try. I would survive. I would fight for myself, for the truth of my own existence, even if no one else could see it. The next morning, I faced the world again, but this time with a different kind of determination. I realized that hiding or running wouldn't solve anything. I had to confront it, even if that meant stepping into fear every single second. I dressed carefully, trying to find clothes that felt comfortable in this new body, that didn't make me feel like a stranger to myself. Even small movements, walking, sitting, turning my head, felt foreign, but I practiced in front of mirrors, trying to mimic the way I remembered moving as myself. It was exhausting and frustrating, but necessary. When I went outside, people looked at me in ways that cut deep. Some stared, some whispered, some openly laughed. I learned quickly that no amount of explanation would make sense to most strangers. But I also noticed something. Some people treated me with more patience, more care, as if they intuitively sensed something was different. It was a strange duality. I hated being looked at, yet I couldn't ignore the subtle kindness in some faces. I wondered if this body, this unexpected change, was teaching me lessons about perception, about empathy, about how the world saw me differently depending on who I appeared to be. School was the hardest. Sitting in class, pretending to be someone I didn't fully understand, I could feel the tension in my every movement. I had always been confident, outspoken, the kind of person people listened to, laughed with, or sometimes envied. Now, I felt invisible, and yet painfully visible at the same time. The stares, the questions, the laughter, it was relentless. I tried to speak up, answer questions, make jokes like I used to, but my voice betrayed me. It was lighter, higher, softer. No one seemed to connect the person they knew with the voice that came from this body. I could see it in their eyes: disbelief, confusion, curiosity, judgment. During lunch, I sat alone, struggling to eat, to focus, to breathe. My friends approached, hesitant. "Hey, are you okay?" one asked. I looked at them desperately, hoping they'd see me, my real self, beyond the exterior. But they didn't. They saw a girl they didn't know, someone unfamiliar, someone foreign. I wanted to scream that it was me, that I was still the same person inside, but the words came out weakly, unconvincing. I'm me," I whispered. They nodded politely, and walked away. No one believed me. By afternoon, panic had turned into determination. I had to find answers. I had to understand why this had happened, and if it could be reversed. I started by searching online, looking for anything that could explain waking up in someone else's body. Every article, forum, or post I found was either a hoax, a story, or a theory that didn't apply to me. It felt hopeless. But then, buried in some obscure forum, I found a thread that talked about unexplained transformations, mysterious body swaps, and people who had experienced something similar. I stayed up for hours reading, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing at the absurdity. But the most important thing was that I realized I wasn't completely alone. Others had gone through similar experiences. They had survived. They had adapted. That night, I returned home, exhausted, frustrated, and desperate for comfort. My parents were waiting, their expressions a mix of concern and worry. I told them everything I had discovered online, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in their eyes. Maybe they still didn't fully believe me, but they saw my fear, my determination, my humanity. My mother reached out and held my hand, whispering, "We'll figure this out together." It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. I felt a small wave of relief. Someone, finally, was on my side. The following days became a strange routine of survival and adaptation. I learned to move differently, to speak carefully, to navigate the world in a body that wasn't mine. I discovered things about myself I never knew, how people treated me differently, how my own perception of the world shifted, how resilience and courage could grow in unexpected ways. I started to experiment, small things at first, the way I styled my hair, how I carried myself, how I responded to stares or comments. Each tiny adjustment felt like reclaiming some part of my identity, asserting that even if my exterior had changed, my inner self was still here. The hardest moments were the nights, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I would ever return to my old life. I missed my body, my voice, my habits, the familiarity of being recognized. But I also realized something profound: identity wasn't just about appearance. It was about who I was inside, how I treated others, how I responded to challenges, how I survived. I didn't have all the answers, but I had strength, and that was something no transformation could take from me. One evening, my reflection caught me by surprise. I had been practicing smiling, practicing speaking, practicing walking with confidence. And for the first time, I didn't see just a stranger in the mirror. I saw me. Not exactly the me I had been, but a version of me that had endured, adapted, and grown. The girl staring back wasn't just a shell. I could feel my own determination, my own courage, my own personality shining through. I realized that maybe this was more than a curse. Maybe it was an opportunity to discover something I never could have imagined, that the essence of who I was wasn't confined to a body, and that survival and identity were far more resilient than I had ever believed. Weeks passed, and life settled into a fragile, surreal normal. I still woke up in this body every day, still faced disbelief, curiosity, and sometimes cruel laughter. But I had learned how to navigate it. I learned how to answer questions without giving too much away, how to move with confidence, how to assert myself even when the world refused to recognize me. I realized that survival wasn't just about enduring, it was about reclaiming control over my narrative, even if no one else would believe it. I started to notice subtle changes within myself. I became more empathetic, more aware of how people treated each other based on appearances. I realized how much identity is tied to perception, to the assumptions people make, and how fragile self-belief can be in the face of disbelief. Every interaction became a lesson. When someone smiled at me kindly, I felt gratitude. When someone doubted me, I felt resolve. I discovered patience I didn't know I had, courage I hadn't needed before, and a sense of humor that sometimes got me through the darkest moments. One day, I caught my old reflection in a store window, briefly thinking it was a stranger. The girl staring back had my eyes, my expressions, my essence, but wrapped in unfamiliar skin. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't pretending. I wasn't lost. I was still me. The boy I had been was still alive in my mind, my memories, my choices. The difference was that now, I had to embody that self in ways I had never imagined. I had to translate who I was into a language this body could speak. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. My parents, after months of seeing me navigate life with resilience and authenticity, began to accept it. They didn't fully understand what had happened, and they still sometimes faltered when they looked at me. But they no longer dismissed me. My mother stopped asking questions that implied doubt, and my father stopped trying to fix something that wasn't broken. They simply started listening, supporting, and believing in the person I was inside. That belief mattered more than any explanation, more than any proof. Over time, I also discovered a small but powerful truth. acceptance begins with oneself. I spent hours alone, practicing, adjusting, reflecting. I forgave myself for the fear, the confusion, the moments I had doubted my own identity. I embraced the resilience that had carried me this far. I allowed myself to laugh, to explore, to exist in a body I hadn't chosen but had learned to inhabit. I realized that identity isn't fixed, it's a journey, shaped by experiences, challenges, and courage. And then one quiet night, lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling, I finally admitted to myself that I had survived something extraordinary. I had faced disbelief, isolation, fear, and confusion, and I had emerged intact, still me, still human, still whole. The girl in the mirror was not a stranger anymore. She was a reflection of my resilience, my adaptability, and my courage. I had become someone stronger, someone more aware, someone capable of navigating a world that doesn't always understand. In the end, I realized that no one had to believe me for my life to be real. No one had to understand for me to survive. Identity, I learned, is not something granted by recognition. It is something forged in the moments we refuse to give up, in the courage we summon when the world doubts us, and in the truth we carry quietly inside. And so, every morning, I wake up, still in this body, still facing disbelief, still navigating a world that doesn't always see me. But I face it differently now. I face it with strength, with self-belief, with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing that no matter what the world says, I am real. I am here. I am me. And that is enough.